So we last left off with the League of Nations just allowing a lot of militant countries and leaders to start taking over smaller, weaker ones, or taking land from other countries because they don't really have any power at this point. The League of Nations is just sort of like spiraling. They're not really sure what to do, and this is just going to keep happening. And they're doing this sort of intentionally. They're taking on this policy and strategy of appeasement. And if you ever hear someone say that someone's doing something to appease someone, they're essentially saying, we're doing it to just keep the peace, to keep someone happy, to avoid conflict. And that's what the League of Nations is doing. And they're doing this for two reasons. One, World War I was so bad that the League of Nations wants to make sure that nothing like that ever happens again. And reason number two is that we were worried about some other places and groups that we thought might be more of a threat. For example, the USSR. A lot of people thought that that would be a more of a threat in the years to come, and we wanted Germany to remain in between Western Europe and Russia, sort of as this buffer zone. So while the League of Nations is just sitting around, the United States is taking on this policy of isolation, this hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil thing. However, FDR does speak out specifically against Japan for their actions against China. They said if they kept acting crazy, then a peaceful group of nations would have to take action. And he's talking about the League of Nations when he says that. But he doesn't really have any power to enforce that because we're not actually part of the League of Nations. Therein lies the problem. So in 1938, Hitler's going to take even more advantage of that appeasement and the leeway that the League of Nations keeps giving him. And what's going to happen is something we call the Anschluss. And the Anschluss is the annexation of Austria by Germany. So if you remember back in World War I, when we signed the Treaty of Versailles, we separated Austria and Hungary into two different countries, and we forbid Germany and Austria and Hungary from ever entering into another alliance ever again. But basically because they get into trouble when they play together. And here, Hitler's basically not just saying, they're not just going to be my friend. I'm not just going to be in an alliance with Austria-Hungary. I'm going to make Austria-Hungary part of Germany now. And this was not an invasion that was unwelcome by the Austrians. The Austrians absolutely loved this. They were very happy about the annexation, overwhelmingly so. If you've seen The Sound of Music, you remember all the people telling Captain Von Trapp to expect the Anschluss and it's going to happen one way or another type of thing. Von Trapp was sort of unique in not wanting the annexation of Austria by Germany. After he annexes Austria, he then heads for the Sudetenland, which was a region of Czechoslovakia that was occupied by Germans. It was a German-speaking portion of Czechoslovakia, which had, before World War I, belonged to Germany. So Great Britain and France at this point feel like they have to step in. So they invite Germany to a conference in Munich, which is in more Western Germany, sort of like Southwest Germany, and they make something called the Munich Pact, where they basically say, we'll let you have the Sudetenland, we'll let you keep the Rhineland and the Saar and Austria and all these other things that we told you not to do. But in return for that, we need your word that that's where you're going to stop, that it's going to be over. And he's like, absolutely, yeah, I promise. But, obviously Hitler is not a man to be trusted, and he's not going to stop there. He's going to continue invading other places. Now, Great Britain and France swore that if Germany took over another country, then they would take action. So he knows that in the future, whatever he does, he's got to prepare for the next move that he makes is going to start a war. Now, he does make it clear at the meeting that if he was to make another move, it would be against Poland. And that sort of sends up some red flags for Great Britain and Germany. So they actually signed an agreement with Poland also, Great Britain and France do, promising to help Poland if Hitler sends any troops into Poland and comes for them. So the Nazis are pretty worried about fighting another two-front war. If you remember in World War I, they got lucky because the Russians had to drop out due to the Bolshevik Revolution. That's not likely to happen again. So Hitler wants to focus on the West before he ever turns east. So he wants to keep Stalin happy, at least for the time being. So he signs an agreement actually with Russia called the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact. And they basically agree in this that they're going to be friendly with each other. And then on the DL, they're going to split up Poland and take the land, because Poland was made up of land from Germany and Russia, but we had taken it from both of them after World War I. So on September 1st of 1939, war officially begins in Europe. It's now already started in Asia with the invasion of Manchuria. It has started in Africa with the Italian invasion of Ethiopia, and here it begins in Europe with the German invasion of Poland on September 1st of 1939. Germany launches something called a blitzkrieg. If you're familiar with football, you've probably heard the term blitz before, and it comes from this German word blitzkrieg, which means lightning war. This is like the total opposite of what happened when the Germans invaded Austria. They invaded Austria with like rainbows and sunshine and hugs, and they invaded Poland with like murder and violence and destroying everything that you see. The picture here is of the capital of Poland, Warsaw. So they absolutely decimated everything. They actually blitzed Poland from 3 sides, and they focus on speed and firepower. 17 days later, on September 17th, the USSR will invade Poland from that final 4th side in the east. So at this point, Great Britain and France officially are going to declare war on Germany because they have no option to, but unfortunately they weren't able, because the blitzkrieg was so fast, they weren't able to take action in time to save Poland. So Poland will fall to Germany, and unfortunately they are going to suffer probably the most damage out of any country, thanks to the Nazis, out of World War II. In terms of physical and even emotional damage, Poland is going to lose over 90% of their Jewish population during the Holocaust. So it's going to be a really, really horrible situation. So now that the war is officially happening, we're seeing these 2 allied groups forming. We've got the Axis powers, which will be Germany, Italy, and Japan, and then the Allied powers, which at this time is just Great Britain and France. Eventually, the United States and Russia will join in. Now, at the beginning of the war, things are pretty quiet for about the first 8 months. If you remember, Great Britain or if you remember this from World War I, we've talked a lot about mobilization. It's because all of these countries are mobilizing, they're getting ready. Great Britain nicknamed it the phony war because it didn't feel like war unless you were in a place like Poland. It felt like any other day. And Hitler had militarized Germany so much that he didn't need to mobilize, and he was getting bored. So he's going to use those 8 months to make quite a few moves. In April of 1940, he will invade and attack both Denmark and Norway. And then in May of 1940, he will attack the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. He's just sort of slowly making his way to France. So France had been preparing for this. They learned from World War I. They knew that they were an easy target for Germany since they shared such a close border, and the only countries that buffered between them at all were very small and weak. So they set up a series of fortresses all along its border with Germany, and placed the best military forces along its border with Belgium. And this was called the Maginot Line, Maginot, the Maginot Line. Now, on the other side of the line, between the line and Belgium, are the Ardennes, which is a forest, a very heavily forested area that France basically thought it would be impossible to penetrate. And in early May, Germany breezes right through it. It only takes them 35 days to get through that forest, to get through that line that France has been working on so hard, and then to conquer and control everything you see in red on that picture. So Germany's just ripping through France. France is going to be split into 2. The larger portion in the north is going to be occupied France, and it will be controlled by Germany for the remainder of the war. And then the bottom blue, smaller part in the south is Vichy France, which is the free part. When Paris was invaded by the Nazis, the government in Paris was forced to flee and move to the south, and they set up shop in this little town you see there on the slide called Vichy, 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 right here. So for the remainder of the war, whenever I'm talking about France, I'm pretty much just talking about that blue piece, because the red piece is going to be off limits to the Allies for the rest of it. Now, France, it only took 35 days to get that much control over, and Hitler thought that Great Britain would be just as easy, because they're not really used to having to defend themselves the way that France is, because they're an island. So he thought that it would be even simpler. So he launches and makes plans for an invasion of Great Britain called Operation Sea Lion. Sea Lion sounds like it will be a naval invasion, but it's actually not. It's an aerial invasion. It's sort of a trick there with the wording, and it relies really heavily on Germany's Air Force called the Luftwaffe. So what Hitler didn't count on was the new Prime Minister of Germany, new Prime Minister of Great Britain, Winston Churchill, who was definitely not down for the whole appeasement situation that what the League of Nations was taking on, and he really wanted to remain strong and stop what was happening in Europe at the time. So in July of 1940, this air battle will begin over Great Britain. It's called the Battle of Britain, and Germany's going to be bombing a lot of England, targeting military and civilian sites, and it's really going to change everyone's opinion of the war, because targeting civilians is really it's sort of really a even wilder thing to do. It's technically a war crime. So when we start hearing about this, our feelings are getting, things over here are getting even crazier. Now, remember, we're in the middle of the Great Depression. It's let's go back to when Hitler's just starting to gain control. It's the mid-1930s. We are deep in the Great Depression, and people are very worried that engaging in a war could send us into an even deeper depression. So in 1935, 1936, and 1937, we passed a series of neutrality acts imposing restrictions on America during times of war, restrictions on ourselves. So basically saying things like we can't sail on ships near warring nations, we can't make loans or sell weapons to either side, things like that. We make no distinction between aggressor and victim. They're all at war. They're all the same to us. It's all something we don't want to get involved with. But in 1939, when Hitler invades Poland, that changes things a little bit for us, and we issue a new Neutrality Act, the Neutrality Act of 1939, and it comes with a unique piece called the cash and carry provision. And the cash and carry provision said that anyone could buy weapons from the United States as long as they, 1, paid cash, and 2, carried them home on their own ship. So you got to come get them yourselves. We're not a delivery service. Now, Great Britain has the majority control of the Atlantic. And on top of that, they're really the only country that can afford to pay cash at this moment, who also has the ability to carry all of these weapons home. So this is pretty much just aid for the Allies, and we just don't have to spell it out that way because of how reality is working out in their favor in this particular circumstance. Now, a lot of Americans were frustrated because they said that helping Great Britain violated our neutrality, and technically it does. We were worried that it might push us into World War II. Other people said that helping Great Britain win early could keep us out of the war. So a lot of people are getting on the radio and talking in the press about this a lot. Charles Lindbergh, for example, was a hardcore isolationist, and he said that we should be more concerned about Japan and Russia as much larger threats to the United States at this time.